Welcome to Podcast Answers, the show where I help you start and grow your podcast, answering any podcasting questions along the way. Guys, it's been so long since I've been here. It feels like forever, but I was away on a trip with my wife for some church-related stuff, and I just did not take any of the extra equipment with me to do podcasts. So it was a vacation for us. So we definitely did that. We vacationed is what we did. So guys, so I've been recording video and audio for the conference that we were at for the church. It's one of the things that I do on the side as well, not just podcasting, but also, talking with, doing any sort of live video production or recording or anything like that. So that's where I've been. And if you want to hire me, I can record your conference too. You can contact me at podcastanswers.com/contact. And I would love to help you out with any recording or any broadcasting that you want to do, because again, that's something that I really just enjoy doing. So what else have I been doing? So I recently made a reel. I talked a lot about it, about community in one of the previous episodes of Podcast Answers, but I just recently made an Instagram reel talking about community and different ways that you can build community. And so if you want to check that out, you can go to podcastanswers.com/IG community reel, IG community REEL, or scan the QR code that's on the screen right now, because that'll get you right to the reel. But I was talking a little bit about, I was talking about how to, like, certain apps that you can use to create communities with your podcast, and it's definitely worth a check out. So if you get a chance, go to podcastanswers.com/IG community reel, and that's where I'm talking about building a community, how to build a community for your show. So guys, today we are talking about Mix Minus, what it is and how to use it, why you would even need it. So what is Mix Minus? Mix Minus is something exactly what it sounds, the Mix Minus. So you would use it when you have a audio coming in from a computer and you're also sending audio back out to that computer. So for instance, if you had a guest on Zoom or Skype or any video conferencing software, because you don't want the audio that's coming in from their channel. So, for instance, if I'm a guest and I'm talking, we don't want my audio to come into the computer to the mixing board that's recording the audio and then sending back out to myself. It's going to create what's called slapback. A lot of people call it feedback, or just kind of like an echo, but it's really called slapback. So essentially it's me, if I was the guest, talking and hearing myself back with a slight delay, because again, what happens is as a guest, I'm talking and it comes into my mixer board and then back out to myself, because there's that two-way audio. And so this is Mix Minus is essentially what you're going to be using to get rid of that. So on a traditional board, and I'm going to say traditional because a lot of the newer boards, like the Rodecaster Pro, which I'm using right now, have Mix Minus built in to it. So on a traditional board, you're going to basically send the output signal that you're sending back to the computer that has the video software on it. You are going to not send the main mix or everything but themselves. So how you would do that is, traditionally you would use an auxiliary channel on the board, and so each channel, like each slider would have an auxiliary send, like auxiliary 1, 2, 3, whatever. And on the back of your board, you plug auxiliary out into your video computer that's doing the video chat or the audio chat or whatever. And so that's what you're sending to them. And so what you do is you turn on each channel you turn up the audio, you turn up the auxiliary send, except for the channel that's coming in. So if I'm talking on channel 1 on my mixer board, and I have my guest's audio coming into channel 2, and then I have the music on channel 3 or whatever that it is. On channel 1, I turn up auxiliary to send out that my channel 1 to that auxiliary mix. I skip channel 2 because I don't want their audio to go back to themselves, because again, it's going to have a delay and it's going to be slap back. It's going to be hard to for your guest to talk. And then I turn it up on channel 3, so that way channel 3 has it set up so um that way, you're getting the music back into the same thing. Now, again, that's a traditional like analog board, but when you have a digital board, well, not even a digital board, because there's a lot of digital boards that still have auxiliaries on them, but a more modern board that's set up for something like broadcasting, and in this case, the Rodecaster Pro, the Rodecaster Duo, things along those lines, they have Mix Minus built in. So the Rodecaster Pro is an amazing device. If you've not checked it out, podcastanswers.com/RCP is where I talk about how to use the Rodecaster Pro for podcasting. And honestly, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm using the Rodecaster Pro to podcast this episode. And so it has essentially 3 USB channels on it. It has 3 different USB channels on it that you can bring anything in to your computer, out of your computer on it. So if you plug your computer into it, it has an input and an output. So I can, on my USB 1 channel, if I bring that up and I have that going to, let's say, Skype or Zoom or whatever, that's going to bring that audio into my Rodecaster Pro. But then also my whole mix is going to go back out unless I turn Mix Minus on. And that's really easy in the Rodecaster Pro. You can just click the gear setting in the upper right hand corner, and then you're going to click Outputs and then Routing. And then you can click on the USB 1 or whatever USB channel that you're going to be looking to do the routing. And there's 3 different options in there. There's a main mix, which is going to have everything that's on your board. It's going to have everything, every channel in it. Then there's a button that says Mix Minus, which will allow you to take everything except for the USB input that you're on, back out to that same thing. Again, this is good because it's a bi-directional audio thing. You're doing a input to the Rodecaster Pro as well as an output back to the computer. And so again, if you're doing any sort of guest chat, you're gonna want this on so that way they're not hearing themselves when you do this. Or there's also a custom button which allows you to get a little bit more detail, because let's say you didn't want to have another channel in there too. You can go in and click custom, and then you can tell it which mics or which channels you don't want on it. So let's say you had your guest on channel 1, USB 1, and you had on USB 2 some music that you were listening to, but you didn't want your guest to hear that. You could take both of those channels out of the return, and your guest would never hear the music, and they would never hear themselves. So that's how that works on the Rodecaster Pro. It's really simple and it's really easy to do. So that's again, I would recommend using a Rodecaster Pro or something along the lines of that, because it is so simple to do all of the podcasting with it. So now, are there times that you wouldn't want it on? Yes, the times that I would not want it on is if I'm not using that audio back into itself. So for instance, if I'm playing audio from my computer, but I don't really care if it's coming back to itself because I'm using it for a different input. It's not the same software. So like, let's say a software is out using the Rodecaster Pro chat, or USB 2 to output music from it, but I'm not going to actually, there's a different app on my computer that's going to be using it as an input. Then it doesn't really matter, because I want them to be able to hear that. So some other things to consider is why would you have to use this? Because some software has echo cancellation built in, like Zoom or Ecamm and a few other video communication software has echo cancellation built right in it. Now, the way that this works is Zoom does this by knowing the audio that it's sending out. So if you're on a Zoom call and your guest is talking, Zoom knows exactly what the waveform is. It knows the audio that's coming out. And so when it hears that same thing coming back to itself, it cancels it out and doesn't bring it in. Now, why would you not want to use that? Well, echo is canceled. The echo, it doesn't have the best sound. So audio that's using the echo cancellation doesn't necessarily have the best sound because, again, it's just trying to process what it knows. Whereas when you're using true mix minus, you're not even sending that audio back to itself. So it doesn't have to try to correct the audio. It's just it doesn't have the audio to try to correct. And then your computer also has to work harder because it has to look and know and go, okay, it has to do some processing and some technology to cancel that audio. So it's not going to have the best sound, and it's also going to make your computer work a lot harder. So if these are topics that confuse you, because again, mix minus can be confusing, and you're not even going to need it if you're just talking and recording yourself. If you're just doing a podcast by yourself, you probably don't need it if you're not bringing a guest in. But if you do have a guest, you are going to need, especially a remote guest. That's where you're going to have this. Someone that's not in the same room as you, somewhere where you're going to have audio coming from your computer, but audio going back to your computer, is where you're going to have the need for mix minus. And if this is confusing, I would love to help you. You can give me a email at podcastanswers.com/contact, and I would love to help you work through this. I do consulting one-on-one, so you can hire me to do one-on-one consulting. I can help set up your equipment. I can help set up the mix minus for you, get you the right equipment, and just go and produce your podcast. So guys, if that's something that you want to do, again, you can contact me at podcastanswers.com/contact, and I would love to help you. Guys, if you want to join a community of like-minded podcasters, you can go to podcastanswers.com/discord, and that's where our community is at. That's where I'm building the community for this show, is podcastanswers.com/discord. You can join other like-minded podcasters and just ask each other questions. You can find out more from people who may have been doing this longer than you. So guys, without further ado, join us next week as we talk more information about podcasting.